If you hear that sound, you already know what it is. Your resume sucks. I'm Andre Harden.
I'm Goalie Green, and we're here to take your career to another level. This show is all about career development. So, welcome to episode 7.
What are we talking about? Episode 7. I lost my job.
That's not good.
Now what?
So, in this episode, we're going to talk about the key things that you need to do to assess once you get into this situation. Mm-hmm. And then we're going to give you the 5 steps that you need to take in order to make a movement forward in getting a new job. Right?
So, question number 1. How did you lose your job?
So this is a good question because you could lose your job in a variety of ways, right?
Okay.
So you can either be fired or terminated. That's pretty much the same thing.
That's pretty common for me, but go ahead.
You could be laid off.
Okay.
Or it could be a reduction in force. These are all different, by the way. Okay. And it will have an impact on how you move forward, right? So I guess I should go into detail on...
Give us the difference between all 3, because usually when I get fired, if I happen to get fired, I'm going to use one of the other 2 to say that. It was a reduction in force and I got laid off. But that's neither here nor there. Give us the definition of all 3.
Yeah, we'll get to the lying on the resume part in a second. But if you were terminated from your job, this should be pretty easy to figure out. What it means is that you did not perform the expectation. Okay? Simple as that. Let's just leave it right there. All right? Now, if you were laid off, that's a little different. Because layoffs can be for a variety of different reasons. It's usually because the company's going through some struggles financially. Okay. So inadvertently, they're going to have to lay off a certain portion of the workforce. A reduction in force is usually something that a company will do if they're in a situation where, let's say, COVID, which recently happened, the market changed. Yep. They had to do a reduction in force or a furlough of some sort where, they had to let you go. It wasn't anything of your issue or your fault.
Yeah.
But, the company can't operate at the same overhead. So they need to do a reduction in force or they need to do a furlough of some sort where you're not going to get paid for the time that you're away. And in a furlough situation, you can come back to your job.
Yeah.
A lot of people did that in 2020. So just some keys to really know and understand, because if you got laid off, it is not the same thing as being terminated. And if you were in a furlough, that is definitely not the same thing as being terminated.
Right. And, key point there is that you got to be honest with yourself as to why you were released in the first place. You need to...
Were you to blame?
Well... Probably not. No. In no circumstance was I ever to blame. It was somebody, pointing, picking at me and all this type of stuff. Never to blame.
I mean, and this is a real question that you have to ask yourself. The first thing is, what was I terminated for, or how did I lose my job? Right? That's the first question. The second question is, were you to blame? It's mirror time.
Yeah, you were. Yeah, you were to blame. Let's just be honest with it. Okay, well, some of you, no. But if you were to blame, you need to go ahead and admit it that you were to blame. Because this is a healing process that you have to go through.
This is true. And you don't want to be taking bad juju with you and carrying it throughout your entire career. I mean, let's just be honest. If you were a cancer to the organization, or, even if it wasn't that bad, if you just weren't good at the job you were in, like sometimes you get in a job where you're gung-ho about it at the beginning, but you get in there and it's difficult.
Yeah.
It doesn't fit your personality. It doesn't fit
over
your
my
skill
head.
set.
I lied in my job interview. I can't do half the stuff I said I can do. I'm in over my head. I couldn't do it. So therefore...
You don't want to be that guy. But to be honest, it happens to the best of us. I mean, I'm pretty sure Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, all the people that we look up to and revere, they were people who were terminated from jobs in their career.
Right.
And it didn't mean that they were terrible professionals. No. It just means they didn't need to be maybe cooking the fries at McDonald's.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. You were better at burgers.
Better at some other things.
Customer service. Hey, you were better at creating a restaurant. You got various things like that, and we're not going to put people in those type of boxes or anything. But point being, this is a lesson learned from you.
Yep.
We need to figure out essentially where do we go from here?
Well, you first have to figure out, is the role that you were in something that adds value to the company?
Correct.
And this is a very this is a key question to ask yourself, because to be honest with you, every role in a company is not a high value position.
Very replaceable. I mean,
100%.
Another you in a minute. Not to quote Beyonce, but they get another you in a minute.
It's very true. I mean, you're going to get compensated based on the level of issue that you resolve. And if your position is a position that doesn't really have to deal with a high level of issues,
right,
or you don't have to deal with bringing in a certain amount of revenue into the organization, or you're not in a position where you can easily identify how you add value to the company, you might want to start thinking about, hey, is that really the type of role that I want to go back into? Because those types of positions are going to be found in the same situation. You know, just because you got laid off here doesn't mean that it wouldn't happen there. If everybody is merchandising within the grocery store,
right,
and during an epidemic, not COVID, because in COVID it was the reverse. Those jobs were, through the roof. They were getting tons of hours. But let's just say in that particular role, for whatever reason, nobody's buying groceries, so everybody's laying off those positions. You have to look at it and be like, do I want to leave from company A to company B for the same type of job? Everybody's going through the same thing.
Well, I mean, you got that, and then the market and all that type of stuff. But what about you said it earlier? Me being a cancer, me being a team player.
That's a big one.
We said this before. We hear this all the time. Your attitude determines your altitude.
Probably one of the most powerful statements.
Yeah, it does. Yes, it does.
It does. It's probably one of the most powerful statements that you could ever hear. Your attitude dictates your altitude.
Because we have so many times where we have confrontation with bosses, leadership, and all that type of stuff. You got to realize that references, all that type of stuff will come from managers and all that stuff. But you also have team members that you're going to have to rely on as well. It's
Absolutely.
a 360 reference check. You got people that you reported to, people that you work with, and people, if you have that reported to you.
Yeah, and this is very key too, because being somebody who's very difficult to work with in teams is something that's going to show itself regardless of where you go. Because people who are unable to collaborate, especially in today's business environment where you're using a lot of technology, and you're working across shores and you're working in different states, and everybody that's on your team might not necessarily sit next to you, it's the easiest thing in the world to identify. Why is so-and-so so difficult to pair with people on projects? Why is it every time I put so-and-so on this project, it never goes right? And so, these are things that you have to pay attention to. You got to get along with your supervisor. That's bar none. If you don't have a good relationship with your supervisor, it's going to be really difficult for you to get to that next step. It's not impossible.
I hear it all the time. They say, I hated him. It was terrible. It was terrible.
It happens.
It was terrible. Manager.
You've had bosses that you've hated before. I have. I mean, but.
Yes, I have. But I have never said that in the interview. I've never put them out there. I love every last one of you. I do.
Absolutely. Learn how to frame things, because you do not want to walk into your next interview and say, well, I lost my job because I didn't get along with my boss. I hated him. They're going to be like, okay. And that's just something that you don't want to go down the road of. You need to understand how to take responsibility for things and frame it in an interview in a way where there's a positive spin on it.
Well, that's good. That's good, because you never know who knows who.
You don't.
Even though you didn't put such as a reference, I may know somebody at the company, and I may do my own check.
Absolutely.
Which is totally fine, and I can do that.
And, especially if you're working with a coach, reference checks are important. Like a coach, before they would take any coaching assignment, at least we would, we're going to do a 360 check. We're going to talk to your supervisor, we're going to talk to your peers, and we're going to talk to your personal friends. The reason why people want to do that is because 9 times out of 10, you're going to end up creating a profile of who this person is and who you're going to get on a regular basis. That's why references are important. So if you pissed off your boss and they're not willing to give you a reference, and you pissed off your whole team, they're not willing to give you any references, Your last resort is for them to call the HR department. Now, let me tell you how this is going to work.
Oh gosh.
Because by law, most companies legally they're not going to try to step into that dirty water. So all they're going to confirm is dates of employment and whether or not you are eligible for rehire. Let me tell you how this works. You're going to tell them, they're going to call, what were the dates of employment? Oh, everything looks good. Are they eligible for rehire? No. Hang up. Guess what they just told them? You got fired. That's what that means. It's very simple.
Very clear. Very clear that, that message given not being rehireable. So it is good to have what we have, talk tracks that you can be able to explain. Maybe you do have somebody that has a vendetta out of you, and the word I like to say is kerfuffle. How do we get out of this?
How do we get out of this?
How do we get this kerfuffle? We need a talk track to get us through
this kerfuffle.
How are we going to position what has just happened to us? And, this is something that really gets people into trouble.
Yeah.
Because they don't really develop this. Their story always changes.
Yep.
All this type of stuff. So we need to develop some talk track, some type of, let's really tell what happened. Let's have our references in line.
Yes.
With what actually happens, and let's move forward with this.
And I don't think people take the concept of what we're talking about they don't take it seriously enough. Because what most people do is you go from job to job to job, and the only time you work on your resume is when you're ready to leave or you lost your job.
Right.
And the only time you work on your talk track is maybe for 30 minutes before the day you have to do your interview. Well, here's the problem with that. You go to an interview. Most companies are going to interview you more than one time for the position,
correct,
especially if it's a position that they're paying, $50,000, $75,000 a year. If you're in six figures, you're definitely going through more than one interview.
Yeah.
For sure. So the problem with this is that if you don't have a talk track that's down pat and that you're comfortable with, and that you're not going to ramble off into the weeds of, giving little tidbits and droplets of the fact that maybe what you're saying isn't true, then you're going to shoot yourself in the foot before you even get to the end of the process anyway. So, I think we've kind of covered enough of how you assess, but just to recap, the first thing is, how did you lose your job? Get clear on how did you lose your job. Once you know what that is, identify if you were to blame. You don't have to be to blame for the whole thing.
Right.
But if you were to blame for part of it, identify it and start working on that stuff. You need to do an assessment of who you are, what you've been doing, and you need to try to improve yourself from a career development standpoint.
So we hit this vehicle, we hit a flat tire, we got fired, we got let go.
Right.
What's our steps to move forward? What are we going to do, to move forward? It's a blip.
It's a blip on the radar. Yeah, blip on the radar. It can happen to anybody. All right.
It does happen to us.
It happens to everybody. Yeah. It doesn't mean you're a bad person, but you need to regroup. And in order to regroup and put yourself in a better situation for the next step, there's 5 key things you're going to have to do. 5. To make sure that you get in the right situation.
Ooh.
So,
all right.
Number 1, contact any and everyone you know who could be a strong professional reference, and confirm with them that they're willing to give you a reference and that they are going to speak highly of you. Now, the best thing you can do is to get a written reference from them. The way to do this would be to write a reference for yourself, as if you were giving yourself a reference. Send it to that person. Ask them if they're comfortable with signing off on it. If they are, you take that reference and you submit that with your application when you go and apply for jobs. Let me tell you why this is so important. If you start working on your resume and putting all this stuff that you never did, you didn't do, and you start applying to jobs that you're not qualified for, or even that you are qualified for, and you get to the point where there's time to start checking references, and then you're just now hurrying up trying to figure out who can I call, who can I get to help me, you're working backwards. So you need to think with the end in mind, and the first thing you want to do is get it confirmed that you've got people that'll speak highly of you.
Right.
That's bar none. So that's the first step. The second step you want to do is to look at your resume and figure out, what do I want to do in my next role, and how can I market myself the best to secure that opportunity? It's worth it to use resume writers, and I'm not saying this because that's what we do.
YRSconsulting.com.
YRSconsulting.com.
Shameless plug.
It is a shameless plug.
YRS Consulting.
I'm not saying that because we write resumes. I'm saying it because we review resumes.
Yeah.
We've worked in HR and recruitment for over 15 years. I can honestly say that 75% of the resumes I receive are horrible. The people who get hired for jobs, most of the time, especially in large corporations, they're either somebody who was referred to the position
Right.
by the manager or somebody on that team, or they're people who are stand out. And when you're talking about, let's say, for example, a job at Google, you apply to the job at Google. Do you know how many people are applying to work at Google?
Thousands.
Thousands. Easy. They don't even have to post the job for more than a day, and they can get thousands of candidates.
At all.
So in order for me to see your resume, your keywords need to be right, your impact statements need to be right, your action statements need to be right, and it needs to be concise to the point and show me that this person's different. If you're not capable of doing that, which most people aren't, even some recruiters aren't,
Yeah.
go ahead and pay the money to get it done for you, because guess what? It's going to pay dividends in the long run. It's going to secure you a better job with more money. So just keep that in mind. But that's number 2. Get the resume right.
Look, and number 3, now that you are honest with yourself on how you lost your job, if it was something that you did, improve thyself. Okay? If it's communication, if it's your typing skills, if it's just you being late all the time, being written up all the time, improve thyself. You know why you were let go. If your fault, you were to blame, improve yourself. If it's a situation you had no control over, continue doing what you do. Be great at your job. Continue to apply and keep doing what you're doing. But if you were to blame, you really need to go ahead and improve yourself.
Yeah.
Take classes, certificate, wake up earlier. Whatever it is, you know what it was.
Most of the stuff you have control over too.
Yes.
So it's usually not the skill set that's the issue. It's person. People have personality traits that usually are the issue in why they're not being successful in a certain role. Because you can teach skill. You can't teach personality and character. You know, and if you're honest, like you can't teach a person to be honest. You can't teach a person to have good character. It can't happen. So, you know, that's the third thing. But the fourth thing that you want to make sure that you do, get your talk track right. And Andre referred to this earlier.
Get it together.
It's a key step. You want to make sure that whatever you're saying is the same in the first interview, in the second interview,
it's gotta be solid.
and in the third interview.
It's gotta be solid.
You don't deviate. They're going to ask you the same question 3-4 different ways. You do not deviate.
Solid. Because we're going to compare notes.
We're going to compare notes.
What did he tell you? What did he tell you?
Why did he tell you he left ABC Construction?
Something doesn't match up here.
Well, he told me he left because he didn't get paid his commission. But he told you he left because there was
no snacks in the lunchroom. Now, what's really going on here?
Yeah.
So
was it the snacks? Or was it the commission?
Let's make sure we have our talk tracks in line.
Talk tracks got to be right.
And then number 5, which is definitely key, is to move on.
Move on.
Tomorrow is a new day.
It's a new day.
You have so much opportunity ahead of you. It's time for you to move on. Yeah, it's going to sting for a while. You're going to hate everybody. You're going to send these messages, emails. You're going to call everybody, gossip, talk about, well, why Teresa ain't get fired? Because we did the same thing. She taking 2-hour lunch breaks as well.
You know that place is going to fail. It's gonna fail. I hope all their deals go south.
It's going to be bitter for a while. But let's try to move on.
Move on.
Bounce back. Look, take these steps. Make sure that you are in line, yet honest with yourself, and let's get back to work. And if you need help, YRS Consulting
Yes.
is right here for you.
Yes.
Goalie has nothing else to do but take your calls and emails. Okay? So like, subscribe, hit that.
Yeah, smash the like button, subscribe.
Hit it.
You
Hit
know,
it.
we're giving out good information.
Tell friends about us. Share us.
Share us. And here's the thing. We're honestly telling you real information. This is real time. We're still in the industry today. So we're not telling you things that aren't actually happening and things that aren't really real. Like, you can look us up on LinkedIn. You can see our profiles. You can see where we worked. You can see the roles that we've been in. We're giving you real information on what actually happens behind the scenes. And if you're in a situation like this and you're trying to get yourself back on track, I'm telling you, those are the 5 key things that you need to do. There's some other stuff that you can do too, but if you don't have those 5 things right, you're not even going to get off the ground. So
for the other things, call us. YRS Consulting, this is Your Resume Sucks.
Yeah.
I'm Andre Harden.
I'm Goalie Green.
And we out of here.